Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
I'm Andrea Goyan.
Today, we are really excited to once again be talking to the amazing Victoria Strauss. Victoria is a writer of fantasy and historical fiction. She's the author of 9 novels for adults and young adults. She's written hundreds of book reviews, and her articles on writing have appeared in Writer's Digest and elsewhere. She's a very active member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, SFWA, and she's co-founder with AC Crispin of Writer Beware, a publishing industry watchdog group sponsored by SFWA. She maintains the Writer Beware website and blog, which provides information and warnings on writer-related schemes, scams, and pitfalls. For this work, she received the SFWA Service Award in 2009, and she also studied comparative religion at Vassar College. Welcome, Victoria.
Yes.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hi. We were lucky enough to get a sneak peek at your kitty, but everyone else is just going to have to believe us that Emily's beautiful.
She thinks so.
Yeah,
She's striped and very big and has a cute black nose and a white face, white, sort of.
So we wanted to welcome you back because we were really interested in hearing, we had several subjects, but we wanted to start with talking about what a writer does to try to promote and sell their backlist. And you have a backlist. I don't have a backlist, but you have a backlist. So I'm so curious what you have to do.
Well, I've done 2 things. After reverting my rights after the initial publication of the books, my stone duology, The Arm of the Stone and The Garden of the Stone, I resold to a small publisher called Phoenix Pick, which at the time specialized in republishing backlist books for science fiction and fantasy authors. And that was, I had a good experience there. They gave me a new cover, they reformatted the book, they issued it, they did a little promotion. And, when you go with a small press and you're reissuing books, you're not really expecting gigantic sales. It's a way to get it back out into the world again. And I was pleased with that experience. It went very well. You have to be choosy about picking a publisher and make sure it has a good reputation and a good catalog. But I had a good experience there. The other thing that I've done is to resell several backlist books to Open Road Media. And at the time when I did that, they were strictly backlist republishers. And now I believe they're doing some original work. But they have acquired a lot of backlist books from all kinds of writers. They have a huge catalog. They republish digitally. They leave the print rights with you if you want to exercise them. They just, or at the time when I went with them, they were just doing ebooks. And again, they gave me new covers, they formatted books, they do regular promotions. They're on all the major retailers. They wrote great blurbs for the books, actually better than the original publishers did. And I signed an initial 5-year contract, and I recently re-upped it because, again, not huge sales, but if you don't want to opt for self-publishing, which of course is the other route that you can go with backlist books, Open Road, I found has been very good to work with, and I have no complaints, and I've had a good experience there, and I'm acquainted with quite a few writers who've also sold their backlist Open Road.
So do you have, are they available for in print as well?
No, I'm not a DIY person, so I never did exercise the print rights, but they're all available as ebooks on all of the major retailers. And for a non-front list book from an alternative publishing venture, ebooks are probably where you're going to get the most sales anyway.
So you're saying Open Road now does both original and reprints, correct?
I don't quote me on that, but I believe that it's also doing originals now.
And Phoenix Pick.
Phoenix Pick. It's, what's the name? Oh, Arc Manor is the name of the publisher. Phoenix Pick was the imprint. So Arc Manor is still thriving. I don't know if the Phoenix Pick imprint still exists, but it's still doing backlist books, and it too is doing originals.
Yeah, I see it right here. It looks like it's healthy and good.
Mm-hmm.
So links shall be below for all of these if you want to check them out.
So I had another question, but Elizabeth can ask a question. Well, I find my question because I had it written down.
I have a question. You have written both for adults and for young adults, and also history and fantasy. So can you talk about the differences between adult and young adult, and possibly also, promoting young adult versus adult?
Perfect.
My YAs have all been historical or fantasy novels. So I don't do contemporary YA, and I think there's a bigger gulf between contemporary YA and contemporary adult fiction because, young people have different concerns and focuses. But when you're writing in the past or in a fantasy world, there's not so much difference, I think, between writing YA and writing adult. Obviously, the protagonists are younger in YA and are newer to experiencing the world. But I don't find that I write in a different voice for either adult or YA. I think I bring the same focus and the same attention to character. So I think it's hard for me to say what the differences are because I don't really experience a difference in the writing. When I'm writing a book, I'm, writing about characters I love and a setting that I'm invested in and, deeply involved with. And that is the same for all my books, no matter who the audience is.
So I have a question. And do you get whether it's a character or a plot, or do you plot them out? And do you think I'm going to do YA, I'm going to do adult, or you just start writing it and think, and it morphs into whatever?
No, it's whether it's YA or adult is a decision made at the outset. And I used to be a pantser, what's called a pantser, where you just dive in and you write, and what develops. And that's how I wrote my first 3 novels. And I just got so sick of going off on tangents or writing myself into corners, or, you know, getting to chapter 20 and realizing there's a huge conflict with what happened in chapter 2. And I decided to make a change. So I became a plotter. And now what I do is to write out a detailed synopsis, not chapter by chapter, but just the whole story, usually between 10 and 15 pages. And I imagine myself kind of telling the story to people around a campfire. You know, I make it as interesting and detailed as I can. And that takes me from start to finish, with all the major plot points and character arcs. And then I put it away and I don't look at it again. And that is the best balance I've found between the spontaneity of kind of discovering things in the process of writing and having a structure to keep you on track, because I almost always wind up deviating from the original synopsis, but because I have the structure, I don't go off into those dead ends and useless tangents that I used to. So you know, the balance between discovery as you go and having like the road to keep you from going off into the weeds is what works for me. And I do it exactly the same for my adult and YA novels. I usually do some pre-planning with character studies and notes about the setting. I almost always wind up doing research for my novels. My most recent 2, which are a YA duology called Passion Blue and Color Song, are set in 15th century Italy. And one of the settings is a convent. So I really had to do a lot of research on that. It's very interesting and time consuming. But even for my fantasy novels in completely imaginary worlds, I always do a lot of research because they're always based on real world models.
Yeah, when you imagine telling the campfire, then do you imagine a young audience? You're telling a young campfire audience as opposed to an adult?
It's a different audience, definitely a different audience for the YA. And you know, the coming of age themes that are so universal in YA fiction, and themes of first love, and you know, these are all themes that you don't have in adult fiction. My adult fiction also tends to be darker and with more complex plots. But you know, the engagement and focus that I bring to every novel that I write is the same, regardless of who I'm writing for or what I'm writing about.
And in the marketplace, have you seen a difference in how they perform, YA versus adult? Have you said, wow, this one does a lot better than this type, or is it just an individual novel?
In my YAs, I think have done better than my adult books, but not much better. But the promotion, whole promotion and marketing is different. And also, you know, for the last 2 books I did different because the marketing landscape has changed a lot. I mean, I published my first novel in 1985. And you know, you really didn't have to do any of the stuff that you do now. You didn't have to self-promote. I did a few interviews that were set up for me by the publisher, but you know, you ushered your book into the world and then you sat back and it did what it did. And you know, we all know that's not true anymore. It's very much, you know, the publisher should be your partner, but it's also very much up to the author to find ways to be proactive with promoting. So with my with my Passion Blue duology, I did a blog tour, which I had never done before. Which I don't know if I would do it again. I don't know if the amount of time and energy that you have to devote into creating content for the book bloggers, I don't know if there's enough of a payoff in terms of audience and attention. So I don't know if I do that again, but it was an interesting experience. You know, there are various, I did advertising on some YA focused sites, and of course I have a website, and I've written some articles, I've done some appearances. I mean, you know, it's, I think the focus of your promotion is different if you've written a YA, but I think the basic tools of self-promotion are similar. There is a very active YA community, online community, and it's both supportive and not. So it's a double-edged sword. And I chose not to be part of that for the reasons that, well, mostly because I'm just very bad at self-promotion. So I wanted to pick the things that I did and do them well, rather than try and do everything and give it, you know, scant attention. So.
Well, I've always wondered how you manage to be such a prolific writer, and you do Writer Beware, which seems to me like it would take up more than
Full time.
more than all of your time too.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm making a confession. It does take up way too much time, and I really have not written any fiction in really since the pandemic started. So it's like a temporary hiatus, which has turned into 3 years, and I need to get back to it. And I have some projects in mind, but somehow I feel like my writing mojo is just not what it was.
Might come back. I'm curious, have you ever thought of, like, I know you usually do, well, fantasy, but also the historical, so they're wedded, like not, you know, modern or in the future fantasy. Have you thought of ever using any of the stuff from Writers Beware that you are so knowledgeable about in your fiction?
Yes, I have. I know there are a couple of books out now, big publisher books, which take a very kind of dim view of the publishing industry. So, you know, writing a book set in the publishing industry about someone who gets scammed. But, you know, in general, writing is a form of escapism for me. I have never been tempted to write about myself or my own life, and I think that's why I'm so drawn to fantasy or history, because it lets me enter worlds that are not my own and live for a while in different worlds, and worlds that I've created, and kind of get away from the mundanity of real life.
Yeah, that's actually quite beautifully put too. And you do serials too, right? Or at least books set in the same world sometimes.
I've written two duologies, set in, well, I've written three duologies. My two adult duologies are set in, they're set in unique worlds, unique fantasy worlds. My Passion Blue duology is historical, with yeah, an ambiguous supernatural element. And it is set in a real world in the sense that it is a world that actually existed. But writing fantasy and writing history are similar in the sense that you're writing about worlds that you yourself can't inhabit. So even if you are writing about things that really happened or places that really existed, there are going to be gaps in your research. There are things you can't possibly know because you can't be there to see and experience. So you're always going to have to fill in the gaps with your own imagination. So for me, writing historical novels are equally works of imagination, as they are, based on a lot of research, which I always do. And my fantasy novels always have a historical base because they use real world, they transpose real world situations and cultures. So there's always a lot of research involved there too. So yeah, I see, I move from history to fantasy and back and forth with ease, because for me, the two are quite similar. And I'm sure that many historical writers would not agree with me on that.
But I think at least most of the fantasy writers that I enjoy would agree with you, at least on fantasy, you need a lot of history and research to make the fantasy real. I think I wanted to say, all fantasy writers do that. And then I realized, well, probably I shouldn't say that. But I think a lot of
even if they don't, there are elements, like if you're going to write a fantasy novel about a blacksmith, I mean, you're going to be using real world examples and techniques because blacksmithing is blacksmithing. So you're always, no matter how far-fetched your world is, you're always going to be using elements of the real world to flesh out your fantasy world. And you need to keep your fantasy world consistent within its own logic. So,
you ever start out like writing a fantasy, a history, and it turns into a fantasy, or vice versa?
no, it's always, I always have the setting pretty clear in mind before I start writing. Particularly for my fantasy novels, I do a lot of world building before I ever start writing, so that I have a good sense of what the rules of the world are and the place is and some of the history. I don't have to write a whole 500-page tome on the history of my fantasy world, but yeah, I always have a good idea of the setting before I start.
And do you have you written a lot of short fiction? Because I've seen all your novels, but I haven't seen short fiction. I just wondered if that was something you did.
I like long form writing. I'm not a natural short story writer. I've written a few and had a couple published. And, when I was a young writer just starting out, I wrote short stories because that's what you're told that you need to do. But they were just really terrible, I have to say. And I still have them. And I was recently going through some files. And I was like, these were terrible. So I've always been drawn to long form writing. That's really, really where my interest lies.
Great.
Nice.
Well, thank you for talking to us again so much. I mean, it's enjoyable, it's informative. And once again, thank you not just for your writing, but all you do for writers. As I
Right.
say, you're really a superhero in the writing world.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And it's really fun to talk to you guys.
Oh,
Thanks.
good. Good.
Oh, I guess
Well,
we should do the best things before I thank our producers.
yes.
Ah.
And today you're going to start this time.
Oh, I'm going to start. Well, I had a number. Oh, I'm going to mention one little personal thing, which is that I was nominated for the Best of the Web for an art piece of painting I did by Riddled with Arrows. So that's nice.
That is-
And then, oh, I have so many good things. Rats, there's a really great article on rats. I strongly recommend, link below. And they probably weren't responsible for the Black Death, which everybody blames them for, and are really like a lot nicer creatures than we give them credit for. They'll play hide and seek with you and like to be tickled. So I guess,
I had pet rats. I had pet rats growing up. They're good pets.
yeah, they're smart, and we always think of them and pigeons as dirty, but they're really not. We don't like animals that learn to coexist with us, I think, for some reason. So
We're dirty.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
that's true.
Was that your share? Oh, okay. That was
Yeah.
cool. You sent me that article. It's a cool article.
That's the one who got jellyfish.
Well, you can do a second one because mine's really, really small. I just want to say that the curse of 2023 ended 2 days ago when I finally got an acceptance on a short story. And I know it's all about me, but everyone's been having a rough year that I know. And it was just like, curse is lifted. So I'm very excited about that.
Congratulations. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. Victoria.
Well, as my bio indicates, I am a fanatical gardener. And I'm always revising and changing my garden, which is a flower garden, not a vegetable garden. So over the past 2 days, I dug out this enormous clump of grass. I literally had to take a tree saw and saw through the roots in order to get it out. And I planted new plants, and I'm looking forward to seeing them next spring.
Nice.
Wonderful. I love to garden too, and I prefer flowers to veggies, so I get it. And we want to thank our producer, Maria Korolov, and our editor, Alex Korolov. We couldn't do this without you because we're hopeless at technology. So thank you very much.
It's true. And thank you again, Victoria. And to our audience, if you have enjoyed our chat with Victoria, please like it. Please leave us comments. We'd love to read them. And if you are interested, you can help support the magazine, the publication, MetaStellar, by going to our Patreon page. And all of the money that we get goes to actually producing new fiction, paying for new fiction. We don't actually produce it. The writers produce it. We buy it. We place it on. So, but anyway, everyone else who works at MetaStellar does so as a volunteer. So all of that goes to help support writers and new fiction. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was lovely. Thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.